There are places on this planet where the silence feels ancient, too ancient, older than the forests that grow above it, older than the deserts that vary it, older even than the seas that have swallowed entire continents whole. This silence is not empty. It is the residue of forgotten cities, buried chambers, vanished languages, and the shadows of civilizations that lived, thrived, built, dreamed, and perished long before what we call history ever began. For centuries, scholars believed human civilization began a mere 6,000 years ago with the rise of writing and agriculture. But the earth disagrees. The stones disagree, the ocean floor disagrees, and the echoes that rumble through caves, pyramids, and submerged ruins whisper a truth much older, much stranger, and infinitely more powerful than the stories written in our textbooks. We live on top of extinct worlds, entire ages swallowed by time, erased by cataclysm, and smothered under layers of earth so deep that only accident, persistence, or disaster could bring them back to light. What if our history is not the beginning but the third or fourth act? What if humanity has risen and fallen more times than we dare imagine? What if the ruins we uncover are not the works of primitive ancestors, but the remnants of civilizations as advanced as, or perhaps more advanced, than our own? Tonight we journey into the abyss of time. We follow the fragments of impossible architecture, the myths that match across continents, the carvings that depict catastrophes no human should have survived, and the strange technologies hinted at in places where no technology should exist. This is the story of the first Earth, the world before memory. And to discover its people, we must confront the possibility that humanity's greatest enemy has never been war or famine or empire, but forgetting. In 1947, in a remote canyon where the desert winds carved stone like knives, an archaeologist named Elias Corvin uncovered something that should not have existed. Beneath a collapsed shelf of sandstone, he found the edges of a perfectly cut rectangular block, so precise, so mathematically immaculate that even modern diamond-tipped tools would struggle to replicate it. But the block was not the discovery. The discovery came when Corvin and his team excavated deeper, revealing what appeared to be a section of walkway, paved with massive interlocking stones, fitted together so tightly that not even a human hair could slip between the seams. According to every archaeological model at the time, this structure should have been impossible. The carbon analysis from nearby organic material placed it at least 28,000 years old. 28,000. 11 times older than the pyramids, twice as old as the oldest official human civilization. Corvin tried to publish. Funding disappeared. Universities shut their doors. Journals refused to print his findings. And soon after, the site was quietly sealed off by military personnel under the guise of geological instability. Corvin's notes, those that survived, described not just stonework, but symbols carved into the slabs, symbols that matched no known language. Some resembled constellations, others depicted impossibly advanced astronomical diagrams, and one, etched deeper than the rest, appeared to show a massive wave striking a shoreline, engulfing a city. Corvin wrote one final sentence before his disappearance. "We found a civilization erased by something they could not escape." Whatever he uncovered, it was not merely a lost city, it was a story someone wanted forgotten. Across the world, from the jungles of South America to the steppes of Central Asia, from the islands of the Pacific to the frozen plains of the Arctic, ancient legends speak of civilizations that reached extraordinary heights before vanishing in storms of water, fire, or darkness. For centuries, scholars dismissed these stories as mythological metaphors. But myths, like fossils, survive for a reason, and when the same story appears across cultures separated by tens of thousands of miles, across oceans they supposedly could not cross, speaking of cities swallowed by the sea, of towers that touched the sky, of beings who shaped stones like clay, and of a world that ended, then something deeper is at play. Consider this. Aboriginal Australian oral tradition describes a great flood predating the last ice age melt. Native American tribes recount a civilization that drew maps of the stars before the stars changed. Ancient Indian texts speak of flying machines and cities that glowed with a brilliance not of fire. Polynesian navigators tell of a vast homeland that sank beneath rising waters, whose people escaped east and west across open ocean with knowledge modern sailors would envy. And in the oldest Sumerian tablets, among the very first written records on earth, there is mention of kings who reigned before the flood, whose reigns lasted thousands of years. These cultures did not meet. They did not trade, they did not share stories, yet their memories align. This is not coincidence, this is inheritance, cultural DNA passed down from survivors of a world-ending event so ancient that only fragments remain in the collective mind of humanity. Tonight, we follow those fragments. We piece together the scattered memories of a world before ours. And the picture they paint is astonishing. An interconnected planet, a global civilization older than agriculture, older than writing, older than recorded time itself. In the deepest stretches of the Sahara and the Arabian Peninsula, where the land becomes an ocean of sand and silence, archaeologists have uncovered something that should not exist. Vast geometric structures carved into the earth by hands that belong to a people we cannot identify. These formations aren't crude or primitive, they are precise, mathematically perfect, and astonishingly large, stretching for miles across barren dunes. And the strangest truth about them is this: they can only be fully seen from above. For thousands of years, these symbols lay hidden, invisible to anyone standing on the ground. Only modern aerial imaging and satellite scans revealed their breathtaking scale. Star-shaped hubs that radiate like solar bursts, lines so straight they defy natural geography, spirals that twist elegantly toward unknown focal points. No dwellings, no pottery, no bones, no written language, no tools. Nothing that explains who built them or why. Yet their craftsmanship suggests a culture with a shockingly advanced sense of geometry, astronomy, and land engineering. Some researchers argue these structures track solstices and equinoxes with near-perfect accuracy, functioning as prehistoric observatories long before the first known civilizations carved calendars into stone. Others believe they served ceremonial or ritual purposes, guiding ancient people in processions that mirrored celestial events. And then there's the most provocative idea, that these symbols were intended for observers in the sky, whether divine, mythical, or something else entirely. But perhaps the most haunting detail is this: the desert has tried, for thousands of years, to erase them. Sandstorms have buried and revealed these alignments countless times, yet the patterns persist, stubborn, enduring, waiting. They are the message of a culture that left no voice, no language, and no body. Only shapes, only silence. And in that silence is a question that grows louder the longer we stare into the desert. Why build a message only the heavens could read? In dense, unbroken forests across South America, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa, archaeologists are discovering civilizations that left behind no monuments, no inscriptions, and no surviving myths, yet lived, farmed, traded, and thrived for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. These cultures are invisible to the naked eye. You can walk over them, hike through their territory, and never realize you are treading on an ancient city. Only LiDAR scanning, technology that strips away vegetation to reveal the earth beneath, has allowed us to see them. What appears beneath the canopy is astonishing. Perfect circles where communal houses once stood. Rectangular compounds that mirror the planning of early cities. Vast networks of roads stretching for dozens of miles. Terraced fields carved into slopes. Defensive ditches and moats. Entire landscapes sculpted intentionally. All hidden under centuries of rainforest growth. And yet, there are no artifacts. The forest reclaimed everything. Organic houses melted back into the soil. Tools decayed. Burials vanished. This means we are looking at the shadows of lives, ghost blueprints of societies, not merely isolated tribes, but full civilizations with complex engineering. Imagine the generations who lived there. Families who built homes, sang songs, passed down stories, cultivated crops, lived quiet, stable lives, and then disappeared so completely that the world forgot they ever existed. Why did they vanish? Climate shift? Disease? Migration? Or did their culture live on through descendants who simply abandoned those regions as the forests swallowed their towns? These footprint civilizations challenge one of our deepest assumptions, that great societies must leave great monuments. Instead, these people lived in such harmony with their environment that time simply folded them back into the earth. And now, with each LiDAR scan, each glowing digital map, we rediscover lives that history never wrote down. They remind us of a quiet truth. Civilization does not require conquest, stone, or empire. Sometimes it requires nothing more than people living well, until the forest closes over their footprints forever. Across the world, from the Andean highlands to Mediterranean islands and remote corners of Southeast Asia, stand ruins built with stones so massive and so perfectly shaped that they seem to defy the technological limits of their eras. These megalithic walls, platforms, and monoliths appear to come from civilizations that briefly reached architectural heights far beyond their neighbors, then collapsed before they could develop writing, metallurgy, or cultural continuity. The mystery lies in their suddenness. These societies did not evolve gradually. They appeared like sparks of brilliance, periods where ancient humans suddenly mastered precision stonework that even today challenges modern engineers. Blocks weighing 20, 50, even 100 tons were cut, transported, and assembled with joints so fine a grass of blade cannot slip between them. Some walls resist earthquakes. Some monoliths align with celestial bodies. Some stones show cutting marks that do not match tools known from any nearby culture. And yet, after constructing these monumental complexes, these same societies vanished into silence. Their building traditions ended abruptly. Their techniques faded. Their cities fell to time. Later cultures settled atop their ruins with no memory of who the original builders were. It's as if these ancient peoples discovered brilliance, held it for one extraordinary moment, and then let it slip through their fingers as catastrophe, migration, or societal collapse erased their legacy. The unsettling truth is that we can touch their stones, we can measure their structures, but we cannot speak to the minds that created them. Their blueprints are lost. Their knowledge is gone. Their names never recorded. They stand as remnants of a forgotten age when humanity may have risen higher, earlier than we ever imagined, only to fall and be reborn centuries later in entirely different places. These megalithic ghosts whisper a warning as old as civilization itself. Human greatness is not guaranteed. It flares and fades. And sometimes, the highest achievements belong not to recorded history, but to the civilizations time attempted to erase. Long before deserts swallowed kingdoms and forests reclaimed ancient towns, rivers were the lifelines of humanity, highways, borders, and storytellers. But some rivers carry memories older than their surrounding cultures, memories embedded not in written chronicles, but in their shifting banks and exposed shores. In regions where modern towns stand today, receding water levels have revealed entire networks of submerged walls, forgotten docks, and stone platforms that predate all recorded inhabitants of the area. These are not the ruins of lost cities washed away by floods. These are the remnants of civilizations that lived with the rivers, shaping their flow, constructing harbors for boats we have never found, and directing water through channels that reflect an engineering sophistication centuries ahead of what archaeologists expected to see. When droughts lower the rivers, the past rises. Rectangular building foundations, long symmetrical rows of stones, irrigation systems as advanced as those of later empires, and carvings etched into rock cliffs that show symbols unconnected to any known culture. These symbols sometimes resemble early alphabets. Other times, they depict celestial diagrams or stylized human figures unlike those of nearby ancient tribes. It raises a chilling thought. Civilizations may have risen and fallen along these rivers long before the cultures we associate with them today even existed. Some researchers speculate these river civilizations were seasonal, thriving during a climate period when rainfall was plentiful. Others believe they were permanent settlements that collapsed after environmental disasters, their survivors migrating elsewhere and blending into later societies. But the deepest mystery remains. Why did they leave no trace beyond stone? No burial sites, no metals, no pottery. Were their artifacts carried away by floods, or did they use materials so biodegradable that time erased them entirely? The rivers themselves remain the only witnesses. Each drought uncovers fragments of a story whose beginning and end are lost, leaving us with pieces of a civilization that trusted the water to sustain it and never imagined the water would one day expose its forgotten bones. Across mountaintops, plateaus, and windswept highlands exist ancient observatories, circles of standing stones, sight lines carved through rock, and elevated platforms that align with stars, solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles with uncanny precision. These structures predate known astronomical cultures, suggesting the existence of a people who studied the sky not as a philosophical curiosity, but as their primary language. They mapped constellations long before recognized civilizations developed calendars. They predicted solstices with an understanding equal to that of later astronomers. And, perhaps most astonishingly, they encoded star patterns into the landscape itself, turning the territory they occupied into a celestial mirror. Some of these sites are positioned in ways that seem intentionally remote, placed atop cliffs where storms rage and winds howl, far from food sources or water. Why build such monumental structures in inhospitable places? The leading theory is that these high perches offered unobstructed visions of the heavens. But another theory, one whispered in archaeological circles, is that these places were sacred thresholds, where knowledge was handed down across generations in rituals that required isolation, fasting, or spiritual preparation. No tools, no written records, no personal belongings have been found at these sites. It is as though the skywatchers came here only to observe, record, calculate, and then leave without living there. Some believe they were part of a larger, hidden civilization whose main settlements lie undiscovered beneath earth or sea. Others argue they were nomadic, traveling between observation points across continents, sharing celestial knowledge without anchoring themselves to a single land. What is certain is that their understanding of astronomy was far ahead of what any nearby culture demonstrated at the time. How did they acquire such knowledge? Was it passed down from even older peoples? Or was this civilization uniquely gifted, reaching intellectual heights that later societies forgot? In the silence of these mountaintop observatories, we are faced with a profound and humbling truth. We may not be the first humans to understand the universe this deeply. For centuries, historians assumed that early humans stayed close to shorelines, afraid of the open sea. But evidence emerging from distant islands, some thousands of miles from any mainland, suggests that ancient seafarers may have crossed oceans long before the cultures we credit with maritime innovation. Scattered across the Pacific, Indian Ocean, and even the Atlantic, archaeologists have found obsidian tools transported across hundreds of miles, plants native to continents appearing on isolated islands, and genetic traces in human remains showing contact between populations that should never have met according to the official timeline. How did they cross such vast distances? What did they sail in? And why would they risk leaving sight of land at a time when navigation instruments didn't exist? The artifacts suggest deliberate voyages, not accident-driven drift. Some islands show evidence of settlement dating back far earlier than written history accounts for. Others contain ancient harbors carved into rock, shaped exactly like those found in faraway continents. These discoveries imply the existence of ocean-going cultures, civilizations whose mastery of wind, waves, and stars surpassed that of later empires. Civilizations that mapped ocean currents, recognized seasonal patterns, and used the heavens as their guide long before the age of exploration. Their journeys weren't random, they were calculated, purposeful, and astonishingly successful. Yet these skilled navigators left behind no literature, no inscriptions, no ships preserved in dry caves. Their boats were likely constructed of organic materials that decayed, and their settlements were often coastal, making them the first victims of rising sea levels after the last ice age. Entire ports, towns, and civilizations may now lie underwater, erased by time and tide. But their legacy remains in the most unexpected places, in the DNA of distant peoples, in the spread of crops and animals, and in the mysterious harbors carved into stones on islands whose earliest known inhabitants should have had no knowledge of maritime engineering. These forgotten explorers challenge our assumptions about human courage and curiosity. They remind us that even at the dawn of civilization, humanity looked at the horizon, not with fear, but with the unshakable belief that something waited beyond it. As the expedition pressed deeper into the subterranean complex, the narrow stone passage widened unexpectedly into a vast rotunda, an immense circular chamber whose roof arched high into darkness. At first, no one understood why the air felt different here. It was denser, almost humming, as if carrying echoes of something that had once lived in this space. Dr. Armand raised his torch, and its glow rippled across the walls, revealing them to be lined with carved concentric rings, each filled with thousands of minute inscriptions, layered so tightly that they resembled ripples frozen in stone. The carvings did not follow any known linguistic pattern. Instead, they spiraled inward, creating the illusion that the walls themselves were slowly turning. Every step inside the chamber produced an impossibly soft resonance, like a whisper blooming somewhere overhead. When Elena positioned her microphone toward the ceiling, she captured a faint vibration, barely audible but unmistakably rhythmic, a pattern hinting at intentional design. Speculation spread among the team that this chamber was constructed not for worship or governance, but for memory, an acoustic archive engineered with precision far beyond what their era should have been capable of. The walls seemed crafted to preserve voices, to carry sound across centuries. Standing at the center of the rotunda, Dr. Armand spoke a single word, and the chamber answered by stretching the syllable into a lingering harmonic tone. It was as if the stone itself had learned to sing. The realization settled heavily upon them. This was not simply a room. It was a vessel meant to hold something. Knowledge, warnings, or perhaps the last echoes of a civilization that feared its own disappearance. The team recorded every moment, aware that the world above had never witnessed anything like this. And yet, each of them felt an inexplicable unease, as though the chamber was not finished telling its story, and they had only heard the beginning of the voice it left behind. Beyond the rotunda lay a corridor chiseled with a precision that defied time. Its walls angled inward toward a single obsidian slab, standing upright like a sentinel at the end of the passage. Embedded within the slab were two circular emblems, a pair of suns, interlocked yet pulling apart, as though frozen at the moment of separation. When the torchlight touched the surface, the engravings shimmered faintly, revealing microscopic channels engineered with surgical accuracy. The team recognized immediately that this was not decorative artistry. It was a codex, a knowledge stone, built using techniques lost to modern craftsmanship. Elena brushed dust from the twin suns, and although she expected cold volcanic glass, the stone radiated a residual warmth, as if storing energy from another age. Surrounding the suns were hundreds of etched sequences, mathematical, astronomical, and geometric patterns too advanced for the known timeline of the people who once lived here. Dr. Armand theorized that the divided suns represented a celestial event, the splitting of a sovereign star, or a catastrophic alignment witnessed by the civilization's astronomer priests. Others believed it symbolized ideological division, a rift that tore their society apart. But one pattern stood out among the rest, a repeating spiral of numbers that, when interpreted through modern analysis, described a countdown, an ancient chronicle of cycles, predicting destructive intervals linked to seismic or cosmic disruptions. This codex was not merely an artifact, it was a warning encoded in stone. And the deeper the team examined it, the more they realized these people had understood something monumental, something modern science had overlooked or forgotten. The codex felt alive with purpose, as if its creators had carved it not for themselves, but for those who would come long after their world had vanished. The explorers sensed that they had crossed a threshold. The chamber behind them told the story of voices preserved, but this was prophecy preserved. The air grew colder as the explorers followed the narrowing passage, their footsteps echoing into a silence that felt ceremonial. At the end of the corridor, the stone parted into a colossal hall, rectangular and solemn, upheld by towering pillars carved with the likenesses of human figures, regal, stern, and poised in eternal vigilance. Unlike typical burial sites, no sarcophagi lay in the chamber. Instead, each pillar bore inscriptions of names, titles, and deeds. But where one would expect the bodies of rulers or warriors, there were only empty platforms carved into the floor. It was as though the kings of this lost civilization had refused to be entombed. Elena noticed first that the platforms formed a pattern when viewed from above, a configuration aligned with the same divided sun symbols they had seen in the codex. This hall was not a tomb. It was an oath, a vow left unfinished. Dr. Armand hypothesized that the rulers had intended to return here, perhaps fleeing an impending catastrophe or embarking on a ritual journey meant to outlast death itself. The absence of bodies added a profound solemnity. These leaders had walked into history without leaving remains, as if their disappearance was intentional. Sculpted into the central floor was a final emblem, a set of footsteps leading toward a sealed archway. The message was unmistakable. The kings walked onward, seeking something beyond this chamber, leaving their hall as a testament of duty, not demise. In the cold stillness, the team felt the weight of an ancient expectation, an unfinished chapter waiting across the sealed stone. The explorers exchanged glances, aware that passing through the archway might mean stepping into the very heart of the civilization's final secret. But something deeper stirred at the edge of their thoughts, a sense that the kings had not merely vanished. They had ascended toward a truth the modern world was not yet prepared to face. The chamber beyond the sealed archway revealed a vast amphitheater carved directly into the bedrock, arranged in steep, concentric tiers that overlooked a circular pit at its center. But what arrested the explorer's breath were the statues, hundreds of robed figures seated in the stone benches, each sculpted with astonishing precision, each bearing an expression of unmistakable judgment. Their faces were not idealized, they were eerily lifelike, as if captured at the exact moment they delivered a verdict that would alter the fate of their civilization. Some figures leaned forward slightly, lips parted in frozen admonition. Others reclined with hands clasped, bearing the weary confidence of those accustomed to passing sentence. Elena noticed that the pit below was stained with what resembled mineralized residues, a dark sheen that glimmered under the torchlight like dried obsidian tears. These were not ceremonial statues. This amphitheater had functioned as a tribunal, a place where leaders and citizens alike stood before the stone judges. And the more the team examined the carvings, the clearer it became. Each judge had once corresponded to a living elder whose likeness had been immortalized only after they delivered their final and most consequential ruling. This was a hall where truth had weight, where consequence was permanent, and where the echoes of justice carved into the stone still felt alive. A chilling thought settled over the group. If judgments here had been rendered during a time of catastrophe, what verdict had sealed the fate of their entire world? Beyond the tribunal, the explorers descended through a series of narrow tunnels that gradually transformed from natural stone to an elaborate network of channels, pipes, and conduits carved with almost mechanical precision. The walls were threaded with intricate grooves, resembling the capillaries of some ancient organism or the wiring of a forgotten machine. At first, the structures appeared symbolic, but a closer look revealed discoloration patterns suggesting fluid once flowed through them. The channels converged into a massive chamber dominated by a towering cylindrical structure, a monolith covered in interlocking geometric patterns and hollow cavities that looked disturbingly like vents or ports. Dr. Armand proposed a theory that left the team in stunned silence. This civilization had engineered a geothermal energy system using principles far ahead of its time, channeling volcanic heat through the veins they carved into the earth. But the inscription surrounding the monolith described something else, an entity known as the sleeping engine, a metaphysical fusion of technology and spiritual belief. To the ancient builders, the machinery was not merely a tool, it was a living force woven into the pulse of their world. Whether the engine had powered their prosperity or contributed to their downfall remained unclear, but the lingering heat radiating from the cylindrical monolith suggested one disturbing fact. After thousands of years, the God Machine was not entirely dead. The explorers' journey culminated in a colossal vault whose dome stretched so high it disappeared into darkness, supported by rib-like arches that melted into the shadows above. At the chamber's center stood a circular dais ringed with metallic fragments, thin curved plates made of an unfamiliar alloy that shimmered faintly even after millennia underground. The fragments surrounded a vast mosaic depicting a sky torn apart, celestial bodies drifting in disarray, fractured constellations, and a great luminous rift splitting the heavens in two. Elena knelt beside one of the metallic plates and noticed microscopic scoring along its surface, marks too uniform to be caused by decay. Whatever these plates once belonged to, they were part of a larger structure engineered to withstand catastrophic forces. On the walls surrounding the vault, murals showed figures gazing upward as beams of light rained down upon their cities, their outstretched hands reflecting both awe and terror. The depiction did not resemble myth, it resembled memory, a recorded event. The vault of the severed skies was not describing a prophecy, it was documenting something that had happened. The chaotic heavens, the fragmented sky, the raining lines of energy, these were symptoms of an atmospheric rupture, a celestial phenomenon that would devastate any world unprepared. The civilization had witnessed the breaking of their own sky. Whether the fragments on the dais were remnants of a protective device, a failed shield, or an escape mechanism, the team could not yet determine. But one truth echoed across the vault like a whisper carved into eternity. Their world fell not by war or famine, but by the shattering of the heavens above them. Beyond the vault of the severed skies lay a dim corridor whose walls transitioned from stone murals to broad, meticulously carved relief maps. At first, the explorers assumed they were symbolic renderings, stylized depictions of landscapes or mythic realms, but as Elena brushed the dust from the massive wall, a chilling realization set in. These were maps of Earth. Yet not the Earth we recognize. The coastlines were unfamiliar, the continents warped or merged into colossal land masses, and vast inland seas sprawled where deserts exist today. But the most striking element was the presence of immense oceans, now completely absent from modern geography. Whole aquatic kingdoms carved into stone, with precision suggesting first-hand observation. One map showed a supercontinent sliced by glowing rivers. Another displayed what looked like a massive inland whirlpool spiraling into an abyss. And yet another depicted an oceanic trench so deep the carving itself receded several inches into the wall. These maps were not imaginative. They were records of a prehistoric Earth, one sculpted long before the rise of human civilization as we know it. If accurate, they implied that this lost society possessed geographical knowledge far surpassing any known ancient culture. Dr. Armand stared at the last map, tracing the outline of a vanished ocean with trembling fingers. "They lived in a world that no longer exists," he whispered, "or they somehow remembered one that came before ours." In that moment, the hall of ancient cartography transformed from a historical archive into an impossible message. The Earth has worn many faces, and this civilization had seen more than one. The explorers next descended into a chamber so acoustically perfect that their footsteps sent ripples of sound through the air. The floor was arranged in a spiral pattern, converging toward a deep cylindrical pit at its center, what the inscriptions referred to as a resonance well. Armand theorized it was a ritual site, but Elena disagreed. She detected faint vibrations emanating from the well, rhythmic and structured, like the heartbeat of a sleeping titan. The walls of the chamber were carved with wave-like glyphs that mirrored the patterns of sound waves, suggesting that these people understood harmonic physics at an advanced level. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the hum became, vibrating through stone and bone alike. When they reached the edge of the well, a sudden tremor shook the ground, and from the depths came a low, mournful tone, a sound so ancient and so profound that it felt as if it had been echoing for thousands of years, waiting for someone to finally hear it. The explorers realized that the well functioned as a massive resonator, channeling seismic energy into acoustic signals. This civilization had listened to the Earth itself, interpreting geological movements like language. But the inscriptions around the well carried a darker tone. They spoke of a chorus of warnings, a series of tremors that foreshadowed a final catastrophic event. In their final days, the ancient people recorded the Earth's screams, signals of a disaster they could not prevent, and now, thousands of years later, the residents still whispered those same messages into the darkness. At the end of the resonance chamber lay a monumental doorway leading to a hall filled with colossal stone tablets, each taller than a human, arranged in rows like silent sentinels guarding forbidden knowledge. The tablets were carved with elaborate sequences of symbols resembling both mathematics and poetry, a fusion of logic and emotion woven into every line. Elena recognized fragments repeating across multiple tablets, forming what appeared to be a narrative cycle, a timeline of events leading to the civilization's final exodus. One tablet depicted cities being consumed by rising seas. Another showed towering waves splitting around a massive domed structure, and yet another portrayed a line of people ascending a mountain beneath a sky fractured by luminous streaks. But what captivated the explorers most was the final tablet, its carvings deeper and more deliberate than the others. It depicted an archway shaped like an inverted crescent, its interior carved with star-like points spiraling inward. Beneath it, a procession of figures walked into the glowing threshold, leaving behind a collapsing world. This was no symbolic metaphor. It was a record of escape, a flight not into the earth, but away from it. The last horizon, as the carvings named it, suggested a portal, a gateway forged through a technology or phenomenon far beyond modern understanding. Whether they fled to another land, another world, or another dimension was impossible to determine. But the tablets carried a final line, carved with almost painful precision. We walk not into darkness, but toward the memory of light. For the explorers, it was the first time the past felt as if it were watching them back, urging them to understand a truth too vast to contain. The deeper the explorers ventured, the clearer it became that the disappearance of this civilization was not sudden panic, but carefully planned withdrawal. In a long, vaulted corridor beyond the tablets of the last horizon, the walls were covered in numerical engravings, arranged in vast sequences, stretching from floor to ceiling. At first glance, the figures appeared chaotic, but Elena quickly identified repeating ratios, orbital periods, harmonic frequencies, and temporal intervals that aligned with celestial cycles. This was not art, it was logistics, a blueprint for survival on a planetary scale. The inscriptions detailed windows of time marked as passages, narrow moments when the sky itself became unstable enough to be crossed. Diagrams depicted mass movements of people, resources, and knowledge, each phase calculated with cold precision. Dr. Armand realized with a mix of awe and dread that these people had anticipated the collapse of their world centuries in advance. Their response was not war or prayer, but mathematics. The civilization did not fall, it executed an evacuation. But the final equations were incomplete, abruptly ending mid-sequence. Something had interrupted the plan. Whether it was time, internal conflict, or a miscalculation, the corridor told a silent story of preparation cut short. Standing there, the explorers felt the chilling weight of foresight and the terrifying burden of knowing that even perfect knowledge cannot always guarantee survival. Beyond the calculation corridor, the tone of the carvings changed dramatically. Gone were equations and geometric forms. In their place appeared deeply emotional reliefs depicting families, children, and elders gathered beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. These figures were carved with tenderness, their faces filled not with fear, but resolve. The inscriptions referred to them as the children of the return, those chosen to carry the memory of the world forward. According to the carvings, not all were meant to leave. Some remained behind willingly, serving as watchers and chroniclers, preserving the truth for any future beings who might one day walk these halls. Elena traced a relief of a child holding a small orb etched with star patterns. It was a memory vessel, a symbolic archive meant to teach future generations who they once were. The reliefs showed children being taught astronomy, language, and ethics, values deemed essential for rebuilding civilization elsewhere. The explorers were struck by the profound humanity of it all. This was not an elite escape, it was an act of continuity. Yet among the carvings, subtle fractures appeared, faces half-finished, figures fading into stone. The evacuation had not gone as planned. Some children never made the journey. Some stories were never carried forward. And in those silent gaps between carvings, the explorers felt the aching loss of a future that had almost survived. At the farthest point of the complex, the explorers discovered a chamber unlike any before it. At its center stood a tall, crystalline structure, fractured yet still upright, embedded deep into the stone floor. Faint pulses of light traveled through its veins in slow, rhythmic intervals, steady, unwavering. Instruments confirmed the impossible. The structure was emitting a signal, not noise, not radiation, a patterned transmission, repeating every few seconds, unchanged for thousands of years. The inscriptions surrounding the crystal referred to it as the last beacon, a message meant to outlast extinction. The signal carried encoded information, coordinates, harmonic keys, and what appeared to be a greeting repeated endlessly into the void. This civilization had not vanished quietly. They had reached out across time, hoping someone, somewhere, would hear them. Dr. Armand stood silently as the realization struck him. The beacon had not failed. It had simply never been answered. Or perhaps it had. The explorers exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly aware that the signal was still active, still calling. And in that moment, a chilling question hung in the air. If someone had received the message long ago, what had they done with it? The past had sent a signal forward. Now the present stood at the threshold of replying. The discovery of the last beacon marked a turning point not only in the expedition, but in the understanding of humanity's place within the larger rhythm of the cosmos. As the crystalline structure continued its slow, unwavering pulses, Elena began mapping the signal against astronomical records, ancient and modern alike. What emerged was profoundly unsettling. The beacon's rhythm aligned not with random intervals, but with specific celestial configurations, rare alignments of stars, planets, and magnetic shifts that occurred only once every many thousands of years. According to the inscriptions, these were moments when the sky itself became a mirror of the past. The lost civilization believed that memory did not reside solely in minds or monuments, but in the cosmos itself. The sky remembered everything. Murals surrounding the chamber depicted generations watching the heavens, recording subtle changes in starlight, tracking movements invisible to the untrained eye. To them, the universe was not silent, it was communicative. Catastrophes were not sudden, they were announced in advance through cosmic patterns. The builders believed the sky warned those willing to listen. Their tragedy, it seemed, was not ignorance, but timing. They had understood the warning, but not all had escaped it. As Dr. Armand overlaid the ancient star maps with modern astronomical data, a chilling convergence appeared. The same alignment referenced repeatedly in the inscriptions, described as the returning pattern, was approaching once more. Not tomorrow, not next year, but within a span of time disturbingly close on a geological scale. The implication hung heavy in the chamber. The catastrophe that ended their world was not unique, it was cyclical. The beacon pulsed again, its light reflecting off the stone walls like a heartbeat echoing through time. It was no longer simply a message sent forward, it was a synchronization device, waiting for the sky to resemble the moment of their fall. And for the first time, the explorers understood the full weight of its purpose. The beacon was not asking to be discovered, it was waiting to be needed again. Standing beneath the same stars that once doomed an entire civilization, the team felt a profound unease. The sky above modern humanity was the same sky that once remembered them, and now it was remembering us. The documentary now pulls back, away from the hidden chamber and into the modern world above. Satellite imagery fades in, seismic scans, ground-penetrating radar revealing impossible geometry beneath deserts, oceans, and megacities. What once seemed isolated now forms a terrifying pattern. Structures bearing the same architectural language, spirals, resonance wells, star-aligned corridors exist beneath multiple continents. The lost civilization was not local, it was planetary. Beneath the Pacific, massive plateaus show signs of artificial shaping. Beneath the Sahara, radar reveals angular voids far too precise to be natural. Beneath modern cities, anomalies are quietly classified, explained away, or ignored. Humanity has unknowingly built its world atop the remnants of another, walking daily over warnings carved into stone. Archaeologists have long dismissed such findings as coincidences or errors because they challenge accepted timelines. But the evidence refuses to disappear. Similar symbols, similar alignments, similar warnings. This was not one civilization that collapsed, it was a global culture bound by shared knowledge of the sky and earth. They understood cycles, they understood impermanence, and unlike us, they recorded it everywhere. The explorers reflect on a deeply unsettling realization. Progress does not guarantee survival. Technology does not equal wisdom. The lost civilization reached extraordinary heights, yet still fell victim to forces beyond control, not because they were weak, but because awareness alone is not enough without action. Modern humanity prides itself on advancement, yet we struggle to listen to the planet, to the climate, to the sky. The ruins beneath us are not monuments of failure, they are monuments of warning. They tell us that intelligence has existed before, that global civilization has risen before, and that it too believed itself unique. But history beneath our feet whispers a harsher truth. We are not the first to reach this point. As the expedition concludes, the chamber of the last beacon grows quiet. The light continues its steady pulse, indifferent to discovery, patient beyond comprehension. The final inscriptions, translated with painstaking care, offer no prophecy of salvation, no promise that humanity will survive what comes next. Instead, they deliver something far more unsettling, a question repeated again and again across walls, tablets, and stone. Will you listen? The lost civilization did not believe itself chosen or eternal. Their writings reveal humility, not arrogance. They understood that civilizations are temporary, that worlds change, that intelligence does not grant immunity from cosmic forces. Their greatest achievement was not escape, nor technology, nor mastery of energy. It was awareness. They tried to speak across time because they knew someone would eventually stand where they once stood. The explorers realized the message was never meant only for them. It was meant for anyone capable of understanding it, for a species that might one day reach the same threshold. The beacon does not demand worship. It does not offer answers. It simply asks whether humanity will acknowledge the patterns written into its world. As the documentary draws to a close, the camera rises from the ancient chamber to the modern sky. The same stars turn slowly above us, unchanged, indifferent, eternal. Somewhere beneath our feet, the beacon continues to pulse, counting cycles older than memory. The question lingers in silence. Will we listen to the earth? Will we listen to the sky? Or will we become another forgotten echo, buried, silent, and waiting to be rediscovered? As the explorers ascend back toward the surface, the documentary turns inward, away from stone and signal, and toward the fragile nature of memory itself. The lost civilization did not vanish in fire or chaos. Their writings reveal something far more unsettling. They were forgotten. Over generations, knowledge fractured, meaning diluted, and warnings transformed into myth. The very mechanisms they built to preserve truth were gradually misinterpreted, ritualized, and eventually ignored. This, the inscriptions suggest, was their final failure, not technological, but cultural. Memory requires caretakers. Without them, even the most advanced civilization becomes vulnerable to the slow erosion of meaning. The builders believed that intelligence alone was insufficient. What mattered was continuity, the deliberate transmission of understanding across generations. Their chronicles describe a moment when scholars argued that the cycles would not repeat, that the sky's warnings belonged to the past. Complacency replaced vigilance. The beacon continued to pulse, but fewer and fewer understood its purpose. Over time, awareness faded, and preparations ceased. By the time catastrophe returned, it was too late to act. Modern humanity, the explorers reflect, stands in a strikingly similar position. We document endlessly, store information digitally, yet struggle to preserve wisdom. Scientific warnings compete with noise. Climate signals are debated rather than heeded. Like the lost civilization, we risk mistaking data for understanding. The age of forgetting does not arrive suddenly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as progress. The ruins beneath the earth are not only a record of what was lost, they are a mirror, asking whether humanity has truly learned to remember. The documentary broadens its scope once more, reframing history itself. The lost civilization no longer appears as an anomaly, but as part of a pattern repeated throughout deep time. Archaeological layers reveal rise after rise, collapse after collapse, each civilization an experiment in sustainability, awareness, and restraint. Some failed quickly, others endured for millennia, but none were permanent. The inscriptions suggest the builders understood this deeply. They did not seek immortality, they sought relevance across cycles. Their writings speak of civilizations as living systems, born, matured, and eventually tested by forces beyond control. Survival was never guaranteed, only earned through adaptation and humility. What destroyed them was not catastrophe alone, but the belief that they had transcended the rules governing all civilizations before them. Modern humanity, standing at unprecedented technological heights, often assumes its permanence, yet the lost civilization achieved feats we still struggle to explain, and still fell. Their existence challenges the comforting illusion that progress equals destiny. The explorers confront an uncomfortable truth: intelligence increases risk as much as it increases capability. The ruins serve as a message carved into bedrock. Civilizations are not endpoints, they are questions posed to time, and time always answers. In the final phase before the conclusion, the documentary turns its gaze toward the future, not as prophecy, but as possibility. The explorers stand beneath the open sky, the beacon now sealed behind layers of stone once more. Its message remains active, pulsing silently beneath the earth. The lost civilization did not ask to be saved, they asked to be understood. Their final gift was not knowledge of disaster, but a framework for awareness. Listening, the inscriptions explain, is not passive, it is an act of responsibility. To listen to the earth is to accept limits. To listen to the sky is to recognize cycles larger than any single civilization. The builders believed survival depended not on domination, but alignment, living within the rhythms of the world rather than against them. Humanity now faces a choice similar to the one they once faced. The warnings are different in form, but identical in essence. Rising seas, shifting climates, changing skies. The question is not whether change is coming, but whether we will listen before history repeats itself. The camera lingers on the horizon as night falls, stars emerging one by one. Somewhere below, the beacon continues its ancient vigil. The future remains unwritten, but the past has spoken clearly. And now, the responsibility has changed hands. There is a moment that follows every great discovery, a silence heavier than awe. It is the silence of responsibility. As the explorers depart the site for the final time, the documentary lingers not on what was uncovered, but on what must now be carried forward. The lost civilization did not fail because it lacked intelligence. It failed because knowledge alone could not protect it from complacency. Their writings speak of a final era when certainty replaced curiosity, when warnings were archived instead of acted upon. The sky was still speaking. The earth was still signaling, but listening had become inconvenient. This, perhaps, is the most dangerous stage of any civilization's journey, not ignorance, but confidence, the belief that disaster belongs to others, to the past, to myths. The builders left behind no weapons, no monuments of conquest. They left questions. They left reminders carved into the planet itself. Their silence now is not absence, it is expectation. Modern humanity stands surrounded by information, yet starved of wisdom. We measure everything, but struggle to measure consequence. The ruins beneath us whisper the same truth again and again. Awareness without action is indistinguishable from ignorance. The lost civilization understood the rules of the world, but learned too late that understanding must be renewed continuously, or it fades. As the screen darkens, a final inscription fades into view, translated simply, almost painfully. Knowledge does not save a world. Listening does. The documentary now addresses the viewer directly, not with accusation, but with invitation. The lost civilization believed that someone would eventually stand where they once stood, that someone would be advanced enough to understand, yet vulnerable enough to repeat the same mistakes. Their final messages were not sealed to prevent discovery, they were preserved to ensure it. "If this is found," one inscription reads, "then time has turned again." The documentary itself becomes part of that message, a continuation of the warning across another generation. The viewer is no longer passive. To watch is to inherit responsibility. The patterns described by the ancients are no longer speculative. They are visible in rising seas, shifting climates, destabilized systems. Different causes, same consequences. The builders did not demand belief. They asked for attention. They trusted that awareness, once achieved, could inspire restraint, cooperation, humility. Their greatest hope was not survival of their people, but survival of the idea that civilizations must listen or perish. As the camera cuts between ancient skies and modern cities at night, one realization becomes unavoidable. The future will judge us not by what we knew, but by what we chose to ignore. The documentary ends where all civilizations eventually end, with legacy. Long after cities crumble and technologies fade, something always remains: stone, memory, warning. The lost civilization understood this. They did not ask to be remembered as gods or pioneers. They asked to be remembered as witnesses. The camera drifts slowly upward, beyond the earth, into the silent expanse of space. Stars burn steadily, indifferent to time. Somewhere beneath the surface of the planet, the beacon continues its ancient pulse, patient, unwavering. Whether anyone listens no longer matters to it. The message has already been sent. What remains now is choice. If future beings uncover the ruins of our world, what story will they read? Will they find evidence of a civilization that listened, adapted, and endured? Or will they find another archive of regret buried beneath layers of forgotten warnings? This channel exists for one reason: to remember what time tries to erase, to explore what history hides, to listen before silence returns. If this story moved you, share it. If it unsettled you, question it. If it made you look at the sky differently, then the message continues. Because the past is not gone. It is waiting.